Imagine for a second that you possess, like, ultimate power over a tiny, perfectly enclosed universe.
Right, like playing a god game or something.
Exactly. You are, for all intents and purposes, the weather god, the master architect, and the prime mover of this entire domain.
Wow, that is a lot of pressure.
It really is. Every single rock you place, every plant you root in the soil, every single drop of water you introduce it dictates exactly how the inhabitants of this little universe will live.
Yeah, I mean, your choices determine how they forage, how they claim territory, and, even whether they'll reproduce.
Right. It is a staggering amount of responsibility when you really stop and think about it. And, well, welcome to our deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are not parsing through some towering stack of dense, peer-reviewed academic papers.
No, thankfully not today.
Yeah, or dissecting a sweeping historical biography. Instead, we have a unique mission for you today. We are going to explore how tweaking a microenvironment can orchestrate incredibly complex biological behaviors.
And the source we're using for this is just fascinating.
It is. We are doing this by examining a single, remarkably intimate field note. It's a blog post from August 2026, simply titled Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 304.
What's fascinating here is that title alone tells you an immense amount of information, like before you even read a single sentence of the text.
Just for the Part 304 bit.
Yeah, exactly. Part 304 implies this level of dedication and sustained observation that you rarely see outside of formal, scientific longitudinal studies.
Right. It's someone quietly keeping a diary of an alien world sitting right inside their living space.
Precisely. And while our subject today revolves around a specific fish, the Kribensis Cichlid, scientifically known as pelvicachromis-pulcher, this discussion is really a masterclass in how environment dictates behavior.
Yeah, it's about learning to read the quiet signals of a world that doesn't speak our language.
Right, relying purely on visual and environmental cues.
So the author of these notes, who goes by the name Ang, isn't just, passively watching fish swim in circles.
No, Ang is actively reading the landscape.
We are jumping straight from the concept of casual pet ownership into this forensic biological detective work.
Which is the best part.
It really is. So the notes detail some very specific physical changes and behaviors happening in the tank. First off, Ang observes that a specific pair of Kribensis Cichlids has been highly active, just aggressively clearing out a specific area in their tank.
Digging up the whole place.
Literally, they've been digging and moving substrate to create this wide, completely flat space right in front of an artificial cave, which in this particular setup is just a humble terracotta pot.
Right, just a simple, inexpensive piece of garden pottery. But to these fish, it's been transformed into a crucial piece of prime real estate.
Yeah.
They're essentially establishing a heavily guarded perimeter.
They're basically building a fortress. But it's not just the landscaping that caught Ang's eye. It is the physical transformation of the fish themselves.
Oh, the coloration.
Yes. Both the male and female are suddenly displaying this vibrant, eye-catching magenta coloration, particularly concentrated on their bellies.
Which is a huge signal.
Exactly. Based on these two clues, the cleared-out flat space and the flashing magenta bellies, Ang deduces that the pair has likely already mated.
Right.
But, okay, let's unpack this for a second. To anyone just staring at a fish tank, seeing fish push some dirt around and look a little colorful might just seem like random Tuesday afternoon activity. Right?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, wait, fish push gravel around all the time looking for food, don't they? Why is Ang jumping straight to, they've mated? Isn't there a risk of projecting human milestones onto a fish?
Well, that is the exact kind of skepticism you need when observing animal behavior.
Okay, good, so I'm not crazy.
Not at all. Because if you only look at one isolated variable, you are highly likely to misinterpret the data. I mean, if they were only digging, they might just be foraging.
Right, looking for snacks.
Exactly. Cichlids are notorious for sifting through the bottom of a river or a tank looking for edible detritus.
And what if they were just changing color?
If it was just color, it could be a physiological reaction to a change in diet or, even just a stress response to the room's lighting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so the deduction comes from synthesizing multiple intersecting data points. You have the landscape modification, the intentional creation of that flat space by the terracotta pot.
So they aren't just digging randomly.
No, they are clearing a staging ground. They're creating a secure, defensible location where they can corner off potential predators. And then you pair that architectural behavior with the biological signaling of the magenta bellies.
Okay, let's talk about the biological signaling, because I find this fascinating. The notes say they are flashing this deep magenta. How are they actually doing that? Are they just blushing?
Oh, no, it is much more complex than blushing. Fish don't have facial expressions to communicate anger or fear or arousal.
Obviously.
Right. Instead, they rely heavily on specialized cells in their skin called chromatophores.
Wait, what actually is a chromatophore? Like, how does a cell change color?
Think of a chromatophore like a tiny elastic sac filled with pigment. Okay, a little sac of paint.
Exactly. And these cells are directly connected to the fish's nervous and endocrine systems.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so when the fish experiences a specific stimulus, like the hormonal surge associated with mating, the nervous system sends a direct signal to these cells.
And then they change.
Instantly. The fish can literally pull the pigment into a tight, invisible dot in the center of the cell, which makes them look pale. Or they can spread that pigment out wide across the entire cell.
Flooding their skin with color.
Precisely. It is almost like turning pixels on and off on a television screen.
That is incredible. They're essentially rendering a biological billboard on their own skin.
They really are. And in the murky, sediment-heavy rivers of West Africa, where the Kribensis cichlid naturally evolved, well, visual contrast is everything.
Oh, because it's so dark in the water.
Right. That magenta belly is a biochemical broadcast cutting right through the gloom. It is signaling to their mate, we are at peak reproductive readiness.
While also yelling at everyone else to back off. Exactly. It's saying, we are highly territorial right now, stay away. So when Aang synthesizes the physical environmental cue of the fortress building with the biochemical broadcast of the chromatophores, the logical conclusion is that courtship is incredibly advanced.
Or they've already mated.
Right.
They're essentially flying a neon flag that says, we are claiming this territory for the next generation. Please respect our heavily guarded front porch.
That's a great way to put it.
And the fact that Aang even noticed this subtle shift means Aang was paying incredibly close attention to the baseline.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't notice a shift in chromatophores or a change in digging patterns unless you know exactly what the normal resting state of that specific tank looks like day in and day out.
You have to know the quiet moments to recognize the loud ones.
Exactly. Which brings us to what I think is the wildest part of this field note.
The trigger.
Yes. These behaviors, the fortress building, the neon magenta bellies, they didn't just happen organically because the fish felt romantic one morning. They were deliberately triggered.
Yeah, Aang orchestrated this entire biological event.
It's crazy. The notes show that right before this flurry of reproductive activity, Aang did something drastic. A massive 90% water change.
A massive shift.
Now, I have to stop here because to me that sounds absolutely catastrophic. I mean, if someone swapped out 90% of the air in my house all at once, I would panic.
You'd probably think the world was ending.
Exactly. It sounds like a flood. Why on earth would essentially draining the tank and refilling it induce mating?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to understand the fundamental difference between a wild, natural ecosystem and a captive environment like a glass aquarium.
Clear.
In a captive environment, the baseline is a state of perpetual, unchanging stasis.
Because everything is controlled.
Right. The temperature is regulated by a mechanical heater. The lighting turns on and off via a smart plug timer. The water chemistry rarely fluctuates.
So it's safe, but it's completely static.
Exactly. But animals did not evolve in static environments. Their biology is deeply wired to respond to the chaotic, dynamic shifts of nature.
So they are sitting in this comfortable glass box, just waiting for a seasonal cue that is never ever going to come unless the weather god provides it.
Bingo. And to understand why they need that specific cue, we have to look at where pelvicachromis-pulcher actually comes from.
West Africa, right?
Yeah, they are native to the drainage basins and river systems of Nigeria and Cameroon. That region experiences intense seasonal extremes, very distinct dry seasons and wet seasons.
Okay, I see where this is going.
During the dry season, river levels just plummet. The water becomes stagnant, warmer, and highly concentrated with fish waste and decaying plant matter.
Sounds awful.
It is. Food becomes incredibly scarce. From an evolutionary standpoint, reproducing during the dry season is a terrible idea.
Because if you lay eggs in a shrinking, toxic puddle with no food, your offspring are definitely not going to survive.
Exactly. So you wait for the good times to roll before you start a family.
And the good times roll when the monsoon hits.
Exactly. The heavy seasonal rains bring a massive influx of fresh, cooler, highly oxygenated water pouring into these river systems. The rivers swell.
And I bet the water chemistry changes instantly, too.
It does. It becomes softer and slightly more acidic as the rainwater dilutes the concentrated minerals. But more importantly, the rain washes a massive bounty of food into the river's insects, mosquito larvae, fresh vegetation.
A buffet just drops from the sky.
Pretty much. This sudden influx of fresh water acts as an undeniable evolutionary signal. It tells the fish that the drought is over, territory is expanding, and an abundance of food is available.
It is the absolute safest time to bring vulnerable fry, their tiny, fragile babies, into the world.
Precisely.
Okay, I love this, but I have a major technical question.
Sure.
Anyone who has ever won a goldfish at a carnival or, owned a basic hair tank is usually told by the pet store, never change all the water at once. You will kill the good bacteria and crash the ecosystem.
Right, the golden rule of fish keeping.
Yeah. So how does Aang doing a 90% water change not completely destroy the tank's biological filtration?
Well, that is a very common misconception in the hobby, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The beneficial bacteria that process fish waste and keep the water safe, they do not live floating freely in the water column itself.
Wait, they don't? Where are they?
They colonize on surfaces. They live in the porous media inside the mechanical filter. They live on the rocks. They live on the glass, and heavily in the substrate at the bottom of the tank.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, the water itself is really just the medium flowing over them. So when an experienced aquarist like Aang drains 90% of the water, they aren't throwing away the beneficial bacteria.
They're just removing the accumulated nitrates.
Exactly. They're mimicking the massive dilution of a heavy rainfall.
Ah, so when Aang drains the tank and refills it with fresh, slightly cooler water, the fish don't experience it as a disaster at all.
No, to their biology, it's a monsoon.
It's the rainy season, arriving all in one afternoon. The aquarist is literally flipping a biological switch.
It is a profound manipulation of their endocrine system. The temperature drop and the rush of clean water basically yell to the fish's brain, the rains are here, food will be plentiful, activate the chromatophores and start claiming territory.
That is so cool.
And without that specific environmental trigger, the fish might just exist indefinitely in that static state.
Really? They'd just never mate.
They could live their entire lifespans without ever exhibiting these complex natural behaviors simply because their biology is telling them the environmental conditions aren't safe yet.
That is mind-blowing. Aang is literally simulating the weather to hack their biological clocks.
Essentially, yes.
But, it's not just the water that Aang carefully manipulated. It is the physical terrain itself. We've talked about the simulated rain, but the architecture of the tank is just as crucial to this story.
Oh, absolutely.
According to the field notes, Aang intentionally designed the physical setup specifically for the unique anatomy of the Kribensis Cichlid. The setup includes that artificial cave we mentioned, the terracotta pot, along with some coral substrates placed strategically at the back of the tank to help buffer the water chemistry.
Right, creating a stable environment.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The crucial element, the piece that Aang highlights as deeply important to this whole endeavor, is the use of fine construction sand for the ground layer.
Yes. The sand is everything.
Not gravel, not those decorative glass pebbles you see in bowls, but fine sand. The notes explicitly mention that these are dwarf-cichlids, meaning they have very small mouths.
Which completely dictates how you have to approach their habitat design. Dwarf-cichlids are often categorized as geophagine.
Geophagine. Wait, which translates to earth eaters, right?
Literally, yes. Earth eaters.
Do they actually eat the dirt? That sounds unhealthy.
Well, not exactly. They take mouthfuls of the substrate, sift it around inside their mouths to filter out microscopic food particles, algae or detritus, and then they expel the clean sand back out through their gills.
Oh, wow. So it goes in their mouth and out their gills?
Yep. It is a continuous instinctual foraging behavior.
Okay, this makes perfect sense. Think about it like giving building materials to a toddler.
Okay, I like this analogy.
If you give a small child heavy, rough, concrete bricks to play with, they can't do anything with them. They don't have the motor skills or the physical strength. They'll just get frustrated, drop them, and ignore them.
Right. They'd just abandon the project.
Exactly. But if you give that same child lightweight, perfectly sized wooden blocks, suddenly they're building castles and cities. You have to match the materials to the physical limitations of the user.
That is spot on.
Ang provided fine sand because the tiny mouths of these dwarf cichlids couldn't possibly move heavy gravel. If the tank had gravel, they would be physically incapable of building that flat, defensible perimeter in front of the terracotta pot.
And this raises a really vital philosophical question about animal husbandry, honestly, and how we define a quote-unquote good habitat.
What do you mean?
Well, is a good habitat simply a sterile box that keeps an organism biologically alive? Or is a good habitat one that allows an organism to fully express its evolutionary nature?
Wow, that's a great question.
Ang touches on something profound in the notes. The fine sand is described as an indicator for verifying and validating the behavior of the fishes. It is not just decorative, it is a diagnostic tool.
Wait, I want to make sure I understand that. How is sand acting as a diagnostic tool? Like, how does dirt diagnose a fish?
Because you cannot ask a fish how it is feeling.
Obviously not.
You cannot ask it if it is stressed or if the environment is enriching enough, but you can observe if it is exhibiting species-typical behaviors.
Oh, okay.
Digging and sifting is an innate, instinctual drive for dwarf cichlids. It's how they forage, how they manage stress, and how they prepare nesting sites.
So if you put them in a tank with heavy, jagged gravel,
You strip away their ability to perform that instinctual behavior. You essentially mute them.
that's incredibly sad to think about.
It is. But by providing fine sand, a substrate they can easily manipulate, sift through their gills, and excavate, Ang gives them a voice.
So when Ang looks into the tank and sees the sand dynamically moved, piled up in some areas, and completely flattened in front of the terracotta pot, the sand itself is providing the data.
Exactly. The physical environment is recording the behavior.
It allows Ang to visually validate that the simulated rain worked, the fish feel secure, they are physically healthy enough to exert energy on natural instincts, and they have confidently moved into the breeding phase.
You nailed it. The sand is basically a blank canvas.
And by looking at how the fish sculpt it, Ang can read their biological state.
It is brilliant in its simplicity.
It really is. You don't need complex veterinary machinery or blood tests to monitor their well-being. You just need to give them the right kind of dirt, step back, and watch what they do with it. It really makes you appreciate the incredible thought and empathy that goes into a hobby like this. It is not just about filling a glass box with tap water and tossing some colorful fish in for aesthetic decoration.
Far from it.
It is about painstakingly crafting an ecosystem that speaks directly to the evolutionary DNA of the creatures living inside it.
It requires a tremendous amount of decentering yourself.
Decentering yourself.
Yeah. You have to put yourself in the perspective of a creature with a tiny mouth, a creature that relies on the sudden rush of a West African monsoon to tell it when it's safe to have offspring.
Right.
A creature that communicates its romantic intentions by migrating pigment cells in its skin. You have to step outside your own human experience and meticulously design a world tailored exclusively to theirs.
That is just beautiful. So let's bring all these threads together because Ang's short little field note really packs a massive scientific punch.
It really does cover a lot of ground.
We started with the physical evidence. The wide, flat, defensible space meticulously cleared out in front of the humble terracotta pot, and those vibrant magenta bellies acting as a biochemical broadcast to the world that something big has happened.
The symptoms, basically.
Right. Then we uncovered the secret trigger, that massive 90% water change, acting as a simulated monsoon, dropping the temperature and bringing fresh water to kickstart their biological clocks.
The mechanism.
Exactly. And finally, we explored the underlying architecture, the fine construction sand acting as a canvas that accommodates their tiny anatomy, allows them to sift and dig, and serves as a vital diagnostic tool for their happiness and health.
It's a perfect little feedback loop.
It is. And after all of this meticulous planning, all of this godlike control over the physics and weather of this microenvironment, what is Ang's final conclusion at the end of the note?
Just waiting, right?
Yeah. Ang writes, so far, we'll have to wait and see for the coming weeks. After all the action, it all comes down to the waiting game.
Well, that is the ultimate truth of biology. You can set the stage perfectly, you can provide all the right environmental cues, you can match the substrate to their anatomy, but you cannot force the final outcome.
Life just kind of operates in its own schedule.
It does, but try to imagine how immensely rewarding it must be for Ang to have designed this complex micro-ecosystem, to have formulated a hypothesis about what would happen if the water dropped, simulating a monsoon, and the sand was fine enough to dig.
And then to see the fish perfectly validate all of those efforts.
Right, by doing exactly what millions of years of evolution programmed them to do. It is a quiet, profound validation of the observer's patience and care.
It really is. It is a beautiful little moment of scientific observation captured in part 304 of A Daily Routine. And, it leaves us with something pretty fascinating to ponder about our own lives.
Oh, how so?
Well, we spent this whole time marveling at how Aang acted as the architect and the weather god to these fish, shifting their entire life cycle and biological priorities with a rush of fresh water and a few pounds of fine sand.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for us? I mean, if a simple change in a confined environment can completely alter the behavior, the stress levels, and the life milestones of these cichlids, it makes you wonder.
About our own environments.
Exactly. What invisible weather changes or environmental triggers in our own modern human habitats are unknowingly dictating our daily behaviors?
That's a slightly terrifying thought.
Right. Are the open concept layouts of our offices, the artificial blue lighting in our homes, or the constant chaotic influx of digital information acting as our own artificial monsoons?
Modifying our behavior without us even realizing it.
Exactly. Who or what is setting the weather in your little universe? Think about that next time you feel an inexplicable urge to rearrange your living room or move your desk. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.